Thanks for listening to Baxie's Musical Podcast. If you like what you hear today, be sure to like it, follow it, share it, give it a big fat review. You can also follow the show on Instagram, Facebook, and TikTok for regular updates about upcoming guests. Today, we're brought to you by Metro Chrysler, Dodge, Jeep, and Ram at Chicopee. Be sure to stop by their state-of-the-art dealership next to BJ's in Big Y, or stop by MetroJeep.com and make it Metro. And then drive home in your new Metro Chrysler, Dodge, Jeep, Ram today.
It's Baxie's Musical Podcast.
Remember how I told you that when it comes to music, people like to put things into neat little packages, easily identifiable ones so you know what you're getting into before you know what you're getting into. Well, it happens. People like to separate things into genres, especially when it comes to music. Of course, that can be difficult at times because genres often break down into subgenres. And even those subgenres can splinter off into subgenres of different subgenres. Suddenly, things get very hard to define because music rarely stands still long enough for labels to permanently stick. Today, for example, we're going to talk about dream pop. Now, dream pop is a subgenre that splintered off from other genres like alternative rock and neo-psychedelia. Neo-psychedelia is a subgenre of psychedelic music which began in the 1960s. And alternative rock is a subcategory of rock music that splintered off from the independent music of the 1970s. It's the subgenre that spawned off other categories such as grunge, Britpop, and shoegaze. Shoegaze is often associated with dream pop, but it's not dream pop. Dream pop is completely different. And while a lot of shoegaze is dream pop in disguise, not all dream pop is shoegaze. Is this making any sense? Among one of the biggest artists in the dream pop universe were the Cocteau Twins, a Scottish three-piece that became all the rage back in the 1980s. Following their breakup in 1997, Simon Raymonde and Robin Guthrie of the Cocteau Twins formed their own record label, Bella Union Records. While Robin Guthrie would go off to make his own music as a solo artist, Simon Raymonde has maintained the day-to-day operation of the label, which has released loads of great music over the last several decades. This list includes the band Deary, a British trio that's about to release their debut album on April 3rd entitled Birding. This is a band that has been together for the last several years and have released two gorgeous EPs that, while great, only serve as an introduction to the sort of ethereal and atmospheric gem that they're about to put out. Deary includes guitarist and lead singer Dottie Cochran, guitarist Ben Easton, and drummer Harry Catchpole. Together, they are about to release an amazing debut album, the sort of album that you would expect from a record label started by two-thirds of the Cocteau Twins. To talk about that and the new record is my guest today, Ben Easton of Deary, on Baxie's Musical Podcast. You know, I've had the chance to spend some time with the first two EPs, Aurelia, which came out in 2024, and the first EP, which came out the year before that. And both were great. But after hearing the new record, and particularly the first two singles, it feels like something has really started to click with you guys. Like you're really finding your footing with this one. Tell me about that, and do you see it that way?
Yeah, I think so. I think because we started this project fairly late on in our careers. Well, maybe that's a bit sort of harsh to say, but Dottie had been playing in music for a number of years. I've been playing music for a number of years, and when we started Deary, it kind of came about quite quickly. So we only spent about 6 months together writing songs, and then we sent the demos off to Sonic Cathedral. And as soon as Sonic and Nat was on board, then it kind of sort of spiraled quite quickly in a good way. So we never really had the opportunity to develop before we were already putting music out. So we've been kind of like developing in real time. So both recording and also live as well. I mean, we've gone through like 6 or 7 live members just because we're still trying to sort of figure out the thing, you know. So yeah, it definitely feels like this record in particular as soon as we started approaching it and started working on it, it just felt a lot more natural, organic. We had a confidence that we hadn't had before. It all came together really, really easily, and I think you can hear that. Yeah.
I think you can hear it, but I also think that the maybe the biggest contrast between, say, like Aurelia and Burning is that, it seems like it's coming from a more personal space, especially, as you read through the lyrics. It feels like you're tapping into something that you haven't had the opportunity to tap into before. That sounds exactly like what you're talking about now. It's not just the music, but even lyrically, you seem to have captured onto something.
Yeah, I think so as well. I think Dottie has spent a lot of time honing her craft of writing lyrics, but I think we both agreed pretty early on in this process that it needs to be a collaborative thing, because essentially we're trying to create something that reflects our own experiences as us three, as in me, Dottie, and Harry. So we all need to have our own input. So it wasn't just up to Dottie to finish all the lyrics off. It wasn't just up to me to come up with the ideas, and it wasn't just up to Harry to provide rhythm and structure. So we're all kind of like jumping into each other's experiences, and I think that's where that kind of authenticity comes from.
Yeah.
So like the first track on the record, Smile, there's a story that we always say, which is that we had all these demos, and we were in a studio in South London, and me and Dottie were we're having a coffee outside, and Dottie went, I think I want to know what that first tune on the record's going to be about. And I was like, okay, what do you think? And she explained that there's been a national emergency declared about violence towards women in the UK
Mm.
at that time. And if you think it's a national emergency, it's just fucking unbelievable. It's a crisis, as opposed to it's just a horrible thing that happened. It's an actual crisis. And she was like, just feel like we have to speak about these kind of things in our music. And I totally agreed. So we've got that side of things, but then there's a track called Baby's Breath, which is about my own struggles with mental health. So it's all kind of, yeah, it's a joint effort, and I think that kind of helps the record along.
As I'm listening to the record and I'm going through it, I'm wondering, like even just the significance of the album title alone, Burning. Tell me a little bit about that and what that means to you.
Yeah, I think it kind of I've yeah, it came out of essentially I think it was Seabird was the first track that we started going, okay, there's a kind of link here. There's the religious iconography, there's a general theme kind of building from this idea of kind of almost existentialism and human consequence and all that kind of stuff. But I also really liked the theme that we had on Aurelia about transformation and change, and birding kind of is a not a secondary part to that, but it's another facet of it where this thing is in motion. It's not complete. It's not finished, basically.
Yeah.
And the only other 2 points to that is always loved the title of Anoni and the Johnsons' album I Am a Bird Now, just because of that sort of finite idea of they've transformed into this thing which is incredible. But we kind of, I don't know, birding is sort of, like I said, it's in the present tense, and if you look at the artwork as well, it's this kid who's not grown up in the world with an oversized clothes trying to fly, and it just sort of has that sort of there's a lot of growth that needs to be done there. So I feel like it's kind of encapsulates all that stuff.
You mentioned about your mental health, and I know that you and Donnie kind of started this whole thing off like around the pandemic, and I know for a lot of people that was kind of like a catalyst for a lot of people's looking more deeply and more seriously at their mental health. First of all, how did you guys get together, and how much did the pandemic play into the focus on mental health for you?
Yeah, I mean, it's quite funny talking about the pandemic now, because it is 5 years ago. So it is almost kind of it's just a long time ago. But I kind of used the pandemic for good, in my own personal life. So a couple of bands that a band that I was in was sort of going nowhere, a little bit sort of directionless, and I just fancied doing something else and playing and making some new music just to sort of help myself through the time of having to be stuck at home. And it sort of snowballed from there. I found Dottie and through a mutual friend, and she was kind of in the same position of like, she just finished university. She wasn't 100% sure what she was doing. I was, sort of mid-20s, and I was a little bit like, I'm not 100% sure what I'm doing. So we found each other at the right time, and we kind of used that as a springboard to not only, have some kind of goal or like some kind of project at the time, but also another medium for us to kind of explore our emotions and our creativity. So it is weird thinking about it because it is 5 years ago, but I feel like that's never really left us. We're still very in tune with our emotions. We're still really, still love making music together. And now we've got Harry in the band as well. It's kind of expanded even more. It's been a long time actually.
Yeah. When I think about, what the pandemic meant to people, and obviously, you're in the UK, we're in the, the United States. To me, in a lot of ways, it's kind of a remarkable experiment into human behavior, how we all kind of managed through that. Some people managed fairly well, and some people,
Mm.
still feel the isolation of it and have a hard time kind of getting out of that. To be able to find someone that you can collaborate with creatively had to be like a great release in a situation like that. To be in that situation where you find someone that you share, a lot of creative ideas and love of a certain kind of music or whatever you're sharing together. How fortunate to be able to have that, kind of experience together.
Yeah, I mean, it's weird. There's almost a lot of chaos theory that goes into all this stuff when if you dig too deep. With Dottie and I, like we we were kind of from similar circles. We went to the same university in South London, so we were kind of cut from similar cloth. Um, and we kind of knew the same people, by hook or by crook. So it wasn't as sort of far away as we think, but it's still, with all the experiences that we've had over the last 5 years together, um, and all of the developing that we've done and the music that we've created and the music that we've kind of experimented with, you can't help but kind of go, what if we hadn't actually met, or what if we hadn't actually sort of written that song or whatever. So it's kind of daunting when you think of it that way. It's just I'm just very happy that that we got together, and it's going the way it's going.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's certainly paying dividends at this point. I mean, as I'm, listening to the record a few days ago, and I'm listening to this. I mean, there's a couple of tracks that really stand out for me. First of all, I think "Seabird," which is the first single off the record, I think is absolutely
Yeah,
beautiful. Just a
thank you.
beautiful track, well written and really powerful. Especially going through the lyrics. But the other song that kind of leaped out at me because it's so different than anything else on the record was "Garden of Eden."
Yeah,
Far more acoustic sounding song. Tell me about those two tracks and how they differ for both of you.
I think that we do write collaboratively pretty much all the time, but there's some tunes that are more me, and there's some tunes that are more Dotty. So Dotty comes from very much a folky past, which is one of the main reasons why I was kind of interested in working with her, is because I remember the first video I saw of her performing live was in this I think it might have been a cave or something ridiculous. Obviously, Dotty would sing in a cave, but it was like her, and there was like some visuals on her, and she was just her and her acoustic guitar, and it was kind of mesmerizing, and it was kind of haunting. And when we got together, I think one of the main things that we spoke about was we don't want to, it's not just my project, it's Dottie's project as well, to get her own voice out. And I think, we throw lots of songs back and forth, but when Garden of Eden came up, not only was it kind of already fleshed out, but it was like lyrically, it was all already there as well, and it just tied in with the rest of the album really, really well. Even though sonically it's a little bit different from the rest of the record, lyrically it really, really works. And we sort of, utilized the sense. It was quite late on in the process that we actually recorded that tune, but we utilized the rest of the record to kind of bring it in and make it part of the record. But it really stands out for me as one of the main lyrically one of the main moments in the record, especially how vulnerable Dottie is sounding on that particular track. Vulnerable and mad at the same time. So yeah.
It's interesting. I mean, I want to talk about her vocally. I mean, you talk about her singing in a cave and what the aesthetic of that must have been like, but there's really a beautiful quality to her voice, and it feels as though that it's not. I think the thing that I like about it is it's not just being used to project lyrical ideas. There's something almost like an instrumental part of the arrangement, the way she sings. It's not so unlike what Elizabeth Fraser would have done in the Cocteau Twins, but it seemed, but certainly done in a more specific way. And I think it's pretty remarkable that she's able to do that. And obviously some of the production of it embellishes that. But I mean it's really pretty a remarkable sound.
Well, it's what's funny is that the first two records, or the first two EPs, sorry, we very much wanted to utilize and experiment and try and find what the sound of the band was, because we weren't really a band. It was just us two, and we had a few sort of bit part players that came in, and we worked with Simon from Slowdive, who did some drums for us on Aurelia. So we were still trying to figure it out, but we would always go back to, well, Dottie's vocal has to be caked in reverb for it to kind of resonate and sort of get out there. And on this record, we really sort of broke that idea down and really wanted to use the reverb quite sparingly, actually, because there's so much noise that you can do, and so many layers that we like to add on. You can start sort of muddying the picture. So instead of making this whole sort of wash of noise and then putting Dottie's vocals in somewhere, some tracks we actually started with Dots' vocal and go, right, that is the key element, the key instrument in this track. How do we build stuff around it? So Smile, for example, vocals are really close. They're very central. There's not really much reverb going on. There's not really that much space, even though the rest of the track is quite sort of atmospheric. The vocals are very tender and very central. And I feel like Alfie is kind of the same. And even to an extent, No Sweeter Feeling, which is a kind of more trip-hoppy part of the record. Dottie is very close and very sort of vulnerable because she can kind of do all of that. She can do the really high shouty things, but she can also really bring it down. So I mean, it's an incredible tool for me as a producer and a songwriter, for me to go, I mean, we can just try anything and everything because it's so flexible. But for Dottie, it's kind of, it's very authentic. It's just how she sings, and she's very very fortunate in that regard.
I mentioned Elizabeth Fraser from the Cocteau Twins, and very clearly, you guys have a appreciation for the Cocteau Twins, and there's other connections that we'll get to in just a minute. And I completely share that appreciation of the Cocteau Twins. I've been a fan since I bought the Pink Opaque in the mid '80s.
Amazing.
What is it about their music that seems to have a connection for you guys?
I think I'm not 100% sure about. I mean, Dottie has a kind of opinion on Elizabeth from her perspective as a woman, and as quite a sort of fragile, emotive personality. So there's this kind of connection that she has. But for me personally, I think that when I first discovered their music, it was the fact that it was so anti what I'd sort of grown up on, and there was a lot of touchstones that I sort of got to be able to get to the Cocteaus, but it came, my background comes from a very sort of angular indie, Smiths, Orange Juice, even to the even to I was growing up listening to the Arctic Monkeys because that's what was big at the time,
Sure.
and still is to this day. So it kind of went from there and somehow went through the Jesus and Mary chains into MBVs, and it was still angry and it was still loud and it was still really, really aggressive, and then just fell on I think it was Treasure one day, just fell on it and went, what the fuck is this? Absolutely insane. And I think what locked it in for me as well was listening to Massive Attack when I was a lot younger. It was a huge record, but really liking that song. But then listening to Teardrop and going, who is this sort of magical being that's on that track? And years later put the two and two together, there was Elizabeth Fraser, and I think it just sort of solidified that it's like music doesn't necessarily have to be so upfront and so direct. It can actually sort of be ambiguous, and it can just be about emotion. And I don't know, that kind of really resonated with me and stuck with me. And even listening to a Cocteau's album now, whenever I do, it just makes me feel, it just puts a smile on my face.
Yeah. I think the thing that always blew me away about them is how much emotion can be culled from just, textures and atmosphere. Even if the lyrics may be perceived as gibberish, they have a place that still draws you in emotionally. To me, that's the most remarkable thing about what they had done, is that they were able to grab so much emotion out of stuff that may not have been so obvious, and it almost kind of snuck up on you.
There's no, in my opinion, a Cocteau Twins wouldn't be able to not survive these days, but it would be a much harder sell nowadays, because I feel like the creative risks aren't being taken as much. And I'm not saying that we would ever jump in and do nonsensical lyrics, but it was just such a risk to do that, and just sort of forego the lyrics and forego the kind of normal sort of traditional ways of songwriting and performing. And it's purely emotion. And even, not to have a drummer and to do the drum machine in the back, it's really interesting, pioneering stuff. So yeah, I mean, you can't not but have appreciation for them.
So here's the connective tissue between all of that. This is your first release on Bella Union Records, which is a label run by Simon Raymonde of the Cocteau Twins. And it was also started by Robin Guthrie as well. But obviously he's kind of moved on doing his own thing. How did this happen? How did this connection between you guys and Bella Union start?
Yeah, it's hard to put a date on it, really. But we released the first EP with Sonic Cathedral, and we're just sort of building up our network there. And I think one day we just got a message out of the blue from Simon saying, do you want to go for a coffee? And we ended up going for a coffee with him and just having a chat, really. There was honestly no secondary motivation. It was just he'd seen the stuff that we'd been putting out, and I think he liked it, and he just wanted to say hello. And what that turned into was a very not just a very lovely sort of friendship between us, but it's turned into a mentorship, not just from Simon, but from the Bella management team. And also just it's kind of a lot of people have jumped on that as well, so it's just opened up a massive world for us. But I think the main thing that Simon brings to us is just a reassurance, really, a reassurance that what you're doing is good, and it's got worth, and it's valuable, and it's valued by people, but it should be valued by you. And it's taken a few years for us to kind of build that confidence up, because beforehand, we're both me and Dottie, both very emotive, very sort of vulnerable, fragile people sometimes, especially when it comes to our art. And there's only there's only so many things that you can do to make a show go right, for example.
Sure.
And even just having a fucking terrible show and Simon going, oh, we've had terrible shows, and giving us some amazing stories, those kind of things, it just helps. It just really, really helps. So we've got a very, very beautiful thing with him, and I think when the opportunity arose that we could release the album with Bella, I think everyone sort of kind of saw that as an incredible option. So we went for it.
Well, I mean, it's one of those partnerships that seems so obvious, and it's great. It's great to hear that he's being incredibly validating and supportive of you guys, because you hear all the time about certain labels putting their own stamp on things and being kind of draconian in what they want out of their artists. And it sounds like what Simon has done is given you the ability and freedom to kind of create your own sound and grow on your own with with plenty of support and good advice. That sounds that sounds like an amazing partnership between you and a label.
It's crazy. I mean, like I said before, I've been in bands for a number of years and never really had someone put as much faith in me as Simon has. And not just me, but in the wider world of the project. And I think the one thing that really stuck with him and the whole Bella team was that as soon as they suggested that they wanted to work together, it wasn't just we're looking to make a record because you got your guys' name is out there a little bit, let's make a record, and that's it. It was very much like we're part of your life now, and we want to work together for 5-10 years at least and sort of really help you develop. And I think what's beautiful is obviously people are starting to recognize the Cocteau connection musically. We're working with Simon, all that kind of stuff, but he would never put the stop on us going in a completely different direction, which is one of those things that makes it more exciting, is that we can do the next record and completely revert to something different. So and Simon will be happy and joyous about whatever we do. So it's great. It's really good to have that kind of freedom.
I think one of the things that's really cool is you talk about like influences and bands that you have listened to and were important to you, and you can hear elements of what the Cocteau Twins did back in the 80s and what you guys are doing now. But the difference is, I think you guys are putting your own very specific individual stamp on this. It's not you can't call it a carbon copy. It's like these songs are coming from your heart in a different place and in a different style than what they were doing. So I mean, I think it's when I found out that that's the record label you're on, I'm like, well, that makes all the sense in the world. Of course they would go with them. They're not gonna they're not gonna go with Alternative Tentacles or something, but something that made a lot of sense for everybody involved.
Yeah, I think it's one of those things that it's nothing that we can't control what people sort of say about our music, and we also can't control the connections that people make. It's a very, very simple and easy connection there, which is we love their music. They were one of the artists and one of the bands that inspired me to make Deary, and now we're in an incredible position to be able to work with one of them and work with their legacy. So that it's a very, very simple, easy connection. But there's thousands and thousands of other bands that inspire us, other artists that inspire us.
We mentioned Harry very briefly early on, and I do want to mention what he does, because I mean he is new to Deary, and I think when you get a drummer that provides some stability, that's good for everybody involved. Tell me a little bit about his contributions here.
It's really strange. So when we first got in touch with Harry, it was very much like we're looking at some live shows that we want to do, and he came in and he filled in and did the drum parts that had been laid down by other people. And he was just an incredible energy to have around the camp, not only just on the road, but we ended up becoming sort of friends. We'd go to the pub and he came to like birthday drinks, and it just suddenly spiraled into, okay, this guy's actually a really, really incredible presence to have around. And it makes it even more sweet with the fact that he was incredibly passionate about the music. He's got the same musical head as we all do. but he also provides his own spin on it. And I think one of the things that you can hear throughout the record is Harry is not the kind of drummer that will just sit still. And I love like I love experimental drummers. I really appreciate their kind of techniques and passion and energy that they bring into the bands that they're in. And Harry just absolutely loves that as well. So we've got this kind of, shoegazy dream pop sound, but Harry brings a lot of chops like to it as well. So it's weirdly jazzy in places. And we've sat in the back of vans before just sharing like hip hop tracks for hours and hours and hours, because we're just like, that break is sick and that break is amazing, and listening to Donuts and Mad Villain and Mad Villainy and stuff, and you're just like, yeah, this is the guy who's really going to know all about the rhythm, and we can look after other parts of the tracks.
There's also something to be said about a live drummer as opposed to a drum track or a drum machine.
Oh God, yeah.
I mean, it's just there's just so much more. Maybe humanity is the wrong word. I don't know if it is or not, but I think it does play a part in it.
Yeah, it's true, and I feel like it's one of those things that we never really thought about having a drum machine ever. I mean, we've got drum machines on records, and we like experimenting with them, but we grew up in, and I definitely grew up in live bands, and my favorite artists are, fully fledged live performers. So, yeah, it was kind of a no-brainer that we would always have that.
Let's talk about that for a little bit, about you guys performing live. I've had the chance to watch some videos online with you guys playing live, and it really sounds great. I mean, and I know you guys have some plans to tour during the month of April and May. Have there been any discussions at all about coming out to the States, or right now you kind of focused on the UK and Europe and like that?
Well, it's interesting. We've actually made even more changes to the live setup since those videos. So there'll be more videos online come the tours in April and May. So we've expanded with a new bassist and a new guitarist as well. And Dottie is going to be looking at just performing vocally and really kind of drilling down into that. And we've had a couple of sessions now, and it already sounds another level. So we're really excited for that. And with that in mind, the band's kind of coming to the next incarnation of the band's kind of coming together. So yeah, there have been discussions about coming out to the US. We want to come out as soon as we possibly can. It's just an incredibly expensive undertaking for a band at our level. But I don't think it's too far away. I think it's probably end of this year, beginning of next year.
That's great.
Is when we'll probably like to come out. It's one of those things we'd love to be able to come out and play, a one-off festival or, South by Southwest or whatever. But it's just, we're still in that phase of kind of figuring out what we can and what we can't afford, So, but we're hell bent on coming out. Can't wait.
That's great. Well, I mean, that's the economic reality that I think every artist is facing now, trying to figure out how to move all of our stuff and us along with it. So
I know, exactly. Yeah, it's a logistical nightmare, but it's worth it in the end.
Yeah. Ben, this has been great. And like I said, I've really enjoyed the record and enjoyed listening to the older stuff too. And it does sound like you guys have kind of, taken a real step forward, and that's got to be incredibly exciting for all three of you.
Yeah, it's good. It's good to realize that making a record isn't at this point as daunting as it kind of seems after spending years not actually making a record and being scared of it. It's actually just been the most the best experience I've had as a musician, so and a producer. So it's long may it continue, man.
That's great. Ben, I appreciate the time today. Best of luck to all you guys, and I wish you guys all the success.
Thanks so much, man.
Cheers. Bet. The name of the new album by Deary is called Burning, coming out on April 3rd on Bella Union Records. Thanks for listening. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, you can email me at bax@rock102.com. I'd love to hear what you think. Thanks to Metro, Chrysler, Dodge, Jeep, and Ram at Chicopee for their support. But most of all, thanks to you for listening to Baxie's Musical Podcast.